Up next is Christopher Hadnagy, founder and CEO of Social Engineering.
Hello, my name is Chris Hadnagy. It's great to be with you here today, talking about the science of human hacking. I want to start off with a really bold statement, and that's that I can probably get 75% of you to fall for some type of social engineering scam. Now, I know that's a really bold statement, and many of you may be thinking, come on, I'm experienced in this. I'm not really that silly. I'm not going to fall for that. Let me tell you why I can statistically say that this is accurate. Over my career, I've sent 14 million phishing emails. And my third book was all about the psychology of phishing and how to set up a phishing program, how to understand phishing. And in that time, I've had about a 75% success ratio when I first start working with new clients. So I can statistically say that 75% may fall for a social engineering scam. Now, let's back up quite a few years, because when I started doing this as a career, there really wasn't much information about social engineering out there. As a matter of fact, when you looked online, there was only videos on how to pick up girls and how to get free food at fast food restaurants. So I had to start off with even understanding, what is social engineering? How can we define it? Many times when I looked at the definition of social engineering online, it said something like the manipulation of a person to do this or that. I didn't feel that was always a really accurate description, because I thought that social engineering had both a positive and a negative side to it. And that by understanding the positive, we can more clearly understand the negative sides. So I actually developed my own definition for social engineering, which is any act that influences a person to take an action that may or may not be in their best interests. I think this broad definition is a really valuable way to understand how we can understand how people make decisions. Now, let me give you a silly example of this that I hope at least some of you will identify with, and it won't be just me embarrassing myself up here. This is my daughter when she was much, much younger. And maybe you have a nice, cute child at home like I do here. And maybe, and I hope, again, I'm not the only one here that has this experience, there's pictures like this floating out there around about this like you. Well, maybe you're saying that's not a good example of social engineering. You love her, so of course you're going to fall for that. Let me explain a little more about what I mean. When my daughter comes to me with a request that anyone can make, hey, Dad, can we have a princess tea party? I'm going to put makeup on your face. I'm going to paint your nails. And I'm going to take some pictures. Now, that request literally could be brought up by any person. Anyone here in the audience could ask me for the very same thing. Now, of course, the answer will be much different. But why? Because when my daughter asks me, there's a bunch of chemicals that get released in my brain, like dopamine, oxytocin. Those chemicals allow my brain to make a decision that normally would be no into a yes. And when I began to understand the sciences behind that, it was truly fascinating for me. And really what it did is it helped me develop, I wanted to have a quest to understand how all of these things work. And not only how they work, but I wanted to understand how to exploit them. And not because I'm a bad guy. I realized that the best way to help people learn how to defend themselves is to first learn how to exploit these things and then build good educational defenses for these type of attacks. Now, of course, I could spend all day talking about the good side of social engineering. But when we're making talks like this, when we're having discussions like this, we really need to focus on the four main vectors of social engineering. Most of these were probably very familiar to you, but just in case they're not, here's a brief definition. Phishing. Phishing is email-based attacks, and we see this so often right now, especially with COVID ravaging the earth. We're just seeing so many attacks that are coming through our email for everything from government agencies to coworkers to family members and everything in between. Vishing, which literally stands for voice phishing, and hey, a fun fact, vishing entered the Oxford Dictionary as a real word in 2015, if you can believe that. Well, voice phishing or vishing is another vector which, since we've seen the world pandemic, which has kept us from being together this year in person, well, that type of attack vector is on the rise. And we're seeing a lot of these type of attacks coming from all over the globe. And what we oftentimes notice is that they call us government agencies, family members, co-workers, IT support, and everything in between. Next, smishing, which you probably guessed it by now, SMS phishing. Many companies have the BYOD policies, right? Bring your own device. Attackers know that. So they're trying to compromise our phones and our tablets and other mobile devices, knowing that we may bring them into the corporate network. And if we do, that may open a huge vulnerability for our companies. And then last but not least, impersonation, which, hey, I know that we're all not out the office anymore and we're working from home, working remotely, and many places around the globe, that's the truth. But we're seeing a lot of impersonation happening on LinkedIn. Now, as we look at these four vectors and we see the different type of attacks that are occurring successfully, we begin to realize how important it is that we understand the sciences behind how we make decisions to potentially fall for an attack that could really lead to a lot of harm. So for me, I want to talk about 3 studies that had a huge influence on my life and that helped me really understand more deeply how we can be hacked as humans. The first, I had this wonderful privilege of working with a man named Dr. Paul Ekman. Dr. Ekman literally is the granddaddy of nonverbal research. He started studying facial expressions way back in the 60s, really looking into how universal they are. And he found and categorized these things called microfacial expressions, which that's a 1/25th of a second muscular response to an external stimuli. Now, what was fascinating about Dr. Ekman's research was that he found that they were cross-culture, cross-gender, cross-race, cross-religion, across everyone. We all had the same exact facial movements. Of course, we feel emotions for a different reason. Now, when I had the chance to work with Dr. Ekman on my second book called Unmasking the Social Engineer, he also taught me something that truly blew my mind. And that is that if we make the facial expression, we actually feel the emotion. Such a valuable piece of data, which we'll talk about again shortly. The second area of research was done by a man named Dr. Paul Zak. And Dr. Zak looked into a molecule called oxytocin. And what is so amazing about this is for years, researchers ignored this molecule in our brain, thinking it wasn't that important. But fortunately, some researchers like Dr. Zak and others got together and realized how important it is. He wrote a book called The Moral Molecule. In his book, he talked about how oxytocin is released in our brain during times when we're intimate with other people, mothers with their babies, fathers with their children. We see that oxytocin is released on all of these type of relationship, trust, and rapport building events. Now, he found out something truly fascinating to me, was that oxytocin is released more when you feel trusted, not when you feel trust. Now, let's imagine what this can mean for you. So if I tell you, hey, I'm going to tell you guys something here at this conference, something I haven't told anyone else yet, and you were to believe me, okay, so you have to believe me. That's the big part. Oxytocin gets released in your brain. I'm your dealer. And now an hour from now, you're sitting in your office and you're scrolling through LinkedIn or scrolling through social media, and you see me in your social media, your brain releases oxytocin again because it's like, oh, that's the guy I know and trust. He trusted me. I like him. An amazing piece of research that we can see how attackers have used this. Our final area of research was done by Dr. Daniel Goleman. Now, he wrote a book called Emotional Intelligence, and in his book, he coined the phrase amygdala hijacking. Our amygdala, there's 2 of them in our brain. They're little walnut-sized pieces of gray matter. The amazing part about the amygdala is they handle all the external stimuli coming into our brain, and they make physiological and psychological change before our brain even has time to catch up. Let me give you an example that will define both the facial expressions and this. So imagine you're deathly afraid of snakes. You're walking through your yard or your garden, and out of the corner of your eye, you perceive what you see as a snake. What happens? Right? You do that, you reel back, you show fear on your face, your eyes get big, you gasp for air. Why? Well, you have an initial freeze, and then your body is preparing for fight or flight. Now, a second later, your brain catches up and it goes, oh, that's the garden hose, silly. And you return back to normal. But if it really was a snake, and let's say you had your little daughter there, you may decide to fight to save her. Or if it was a snake and you were alone, you may decide to flight or run, right? And all of that's happening in the amygdala, all of those processes before our brain even has a chance to catch up. Now, what's fascinating about his research is that when Dr. Goldman put an fMRI helmet on his subjects and he triggered emotions like you could see here, anger, disgust, fear, happiness, sadness, look at where the bright colors are, right down by that amygdala, whereas the logic centers on the top there are not being triggered, showing that when strong emotion is in play, people make decisions purely on that emotion and not on logic and reasoning. Now, let me put this all together for you with a case study. This is about a pen test that we had as a company. And in this pen test, we were given 1,000 people that we had to fish. We were going to be a multi-vectored attack. We were going to fish them and then vish them. So we had 1,000 people we were going to fish. We did OSINT, open source intelligence gathering, and we found that these people all really, really liked Apple devices. You know, they took the pill, right? They loved it. Now, they had to use Windows at work, but they loved their iPhones and their iPads and their MacBooks, and they talked about it. There was even a Facebook group about these employees talking about how they wanted to bring their MacBooks to work and things like that because they liked them better. So we had bought a domain that looked just like their company domain. So it's something like updates-companyname.com, right? And we had sent a phishing email from there saying that we had 10 brand new iPhones and we were going to raffle them off to the company. And to get a chance to win, all you have to do is click on this link, go to the webpage, which looks identical to their corporate page, and enter your domain credentials, your username and password for your network login, and then you were automatically entered into the raffle. Can you guess how many people went and entered their domain credentials? 75%. Now, out of that 75%, we started to make phone calls. And the next vector was going to be that we were calling from IT. Well, one young man told us, hey, I got the email from you guys. I already changed my password. I'm good. So now we knew that IT support had sent out a mass email to the company. So to safeguard, what we did is we changed our pretext. And I called people as Paul from IT, saying that now we needed them to go download this exe to clean their machine from a virus that was on there. But it wasn't a virus cleaner. Instead, it was a Meterpreter reverse shell. Now, I want to play this phone call for you. And when I'm playing this, I want you to listen and think to yourself, is this realistic? Would you have fallen for this? Take a listen and we'll talk after.
Did your password change?
Yes, I did.
Okay, excellent. Just wanted to tell you that was really good. That's the way it should have been handled.
Okay, yeah. As soon as we realized it, two of us jumped right on it.
Okay, so there was another guy in your team that also?
Yeah, I think it was JR.
JR, okay. I'm just going to write down. I'll be talking to him later on. So just to follow up, what we're doing is, are you on the VPN right now? You're on your work machine?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to give you an internal address. It's an FTP site that we set up for the employees. You can go there. You can see there's one file there that you'll be able to download, and it will just clean up any residual mess from that website.
Okay.
So if you're at your machine, just open up a browser, and I'll give you the address. Type in FTP.
FTP?
Yep, F as in Frank, T as in Tom, and then P as in Paul, and then a colon, and then 2 slashes, and these are the slashes that are by your question mark, the same button as your question mark.
Gotcha, STP, okay.
And then the word is update, dash, and the dash like the minus sign.
Gotcha.
.com.
Okay.
And when you go there, it should open up, it should say index of, and it should have one file. There's a file called PC Checker.
Okay, it's here. Okay, double click on that?
Yeah, click on that.
Okay.
And it should download.
Okay.
Or it should ask you if you want to run or save. Yeah, click run.
Okay.
And if everything goes good, you should get no alerts. If you have a residual problem from that site, then you'll get a message. But if nothing happens and everything's clean and good and we're done.
Okay, I just got a second thing. It said the publisher could not be verified. Are you sure you want to run this software?
Yeah, click OK.
Run again? Okay. Okay, now it took me back to the original screen.
Okay, that's good. So if you got no error message, then you're good to go. So you're clean.
Okay, well, thanks for the help.
Not a problem. We'll talk to you later.
Yeah. And with that, we had remote access to his machine with his username and password. Sometimes when we hear attacks like this or we see them, people in my industry at least will use a phrase, there's no patch for human stupidity. Let me tell you why I feel that is really, really wrong. Because if we really believe that, that means we're saying that only stupid humans fall for these type of attacks. But I want to tell you another really embarrassing story in just a few seconds that will help you understand where I hopefully is that is not true. But before I do, I just want to remind you, I've sent 14 million phishing emails in my career, and I wrote a book on the psychology of phishing. Yet, I fell for a fish. See, I'm an Amazon junkie. I'm one of those guys that loves ordering things on Amazon. And I was heading out to a conference in Vegas a couple years ago, and I had ordered a ton of stuff from Amazon to go right to the hotel. And I got an email as I was packing my office up that said one of my recent orders would not be shipped due to a declined credit card. Without any thinking at all, I clicked on that link. I went to a page that looked just like an Amazon login. And the only thing that saved me is I realized when I looked up at the URL bar before I hit submit that it was actually a Russian website and not really Amazon. But I fell for it. Now, that's why I don't think you could say that only stupid humans fall for these things. I think it's important to understand with the right emotional trigger at the right emotional time, any person can fall for this. So what's the solution? Let me give you the answer as we sum up all of the rest of this information that you just got, which is you need to repeat this phrase yourself. It's okay to wait. What Dr. Goldman found in his research, that something like a simple pause for 30 seconds can turn our brains from an emotional state back to a logical state. And by doing that, we allow ourselves the freedom to think clearly, think critically, and think logically, and hopefully not be the low-hanging fruit and fall for human-based attacks. Thank you for letting me spend a little time with you today talking about the science of human hacking.